When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject, he of the sun. User, AnonSun12. Posted, March 3rd, 1998.
The story I'm going to share isn't my own. It's my dad's. If he knew I told anyone, I'd be in all kinds of trouble, but he only uses the internet for work and has never heard of this board, so it should be fine. I also won't use any real names, as there's a missing person involved and their family has suffered enough. If you watch the news at all, you might have heard of a big project where 8 people locked themselves into a huge biosphere for 2 years. The idea was they would cultivate their own environment, grow plants that would be harvestable for food, but would also produce enough oxygen to meet their needs. They also brought in pollinators for those plants and livestock they would raise and slaughter as needed. They'd be cut off from the world that entire time, working towards helping us learn how this could eventually be connected to surviving on other planets. It was a wild scheme, and it didn't really work out the way they wanted it to. All of that is public knowledge. What isn't public knowledge is the real reason why. My dad was one of the 8 selected for the project. My mother wasn't very happy about this, as it meant she'd be left raising us on her own for 2 whole years, but there was no talking my dad out of it. If you know the story, you know that on September 26, 1991, 8 people went into the biosphere, and on September 26, 1993, 8 people came out. What no one knows is that it wasn't exactly the same 8 people. Another member of the team was my dad's friend Kate, who my mom was never a big fan of. Kate was a pretty, outgoing artist who was liked by almost everyone she met. Her and Dad had been friends long before he met Mom, and I think that was always a sticking point between them. The thing about Kate was that she sometimes went from crazy and fun to just crazy, talking about hearing voices or seeing things other people couldn't. All of the Biosphere team were a little on the hippie side, so this wasn't disqualifying, but looking back, maybe it should have been. The Biosphere was split into 7 biomes: ocean, desert, wetlands, rainforest, grassland, agriculture, and then the living area. The public story goes that partway through the 2-year cycle, microbes in the soil were producing carbon dioxide faster than the plants could produce oxygen, and so oxygen saturation was becoming dangerously low. Dad says that this part is true and that the crew split into 2 camps. One who wanted to open the biome up to outside oxygen, the other who wanted to figure it out on their own. In the end, the biome was open, but not because the first team won. It was open because Kate had disappeared, and a replacement team member who looked enough like her to fool the press had to be introduced. According to Dad, Kate got weird shortly after the door to the outside world was sealed. He said she started having strange dreams and would sometimes wake up gasping like she was out of breath. He claims he knows this because their sleeping areas were close together, and if I had to guess, I'd say they were real close, if you get my meaning. I think my mom had the same thought because her and Dad sleep in different rooms now, but anyways. When Dad asked Kate about the dreams, she'd say something like, "The grass was telling me a story," or "We are not the first people on this land." Typical Kate stuff. Over time, her wake-ups got more and more frantic, and she was less inclined to talk about what she was seeing in her dreams. Dad said that she was always writing in her journal, but kept it close to her and never let anyone see inside. Her and my dad used to talk for hours, and I guess the longer this went on, the less she wanted to talk to anybody. If they did talk, she would say even weirder and more cryptic stuff than normal. One time, her and Dad had an argument where she told him he was blind because, in her words, "It's so porous here, but you're too closed off to see it." Everyone in the project had a job, and Kate slowly stopped doing hers. Instead, she would spend hours in the grassland biome talking to herself. One day, another member of the team, Aurelia, flagged Dad down to talk about what was going on. Dad said that Aurelia looked rattled, which wasn't like her at all. She said she had been passing through the grassland biome a moment ago when she heard Kate talking, which by now wasn't unusual, but what upset Aurelia so much was that she heard someone talking back. She thought maybe Kate and Dad were on speaking terms again, but when she had a clear line of sight on the other woman, Aurelia could see she was alone. The male voice she had been hearing abruptly cut off, and Kate looked back at her in what looked like jealousy. That's when Aurelia took off to find my dad. The oxygen issue began in earnest after this, so the focus quickly went from Kate's problems to the larger issues facing the whole team. Dad also suspected that she might be having issues related to the lowered oxygen levels and began suggesting it was in her best interest to be removed from the project. By this point, everyone was uncomfortable with Kate's behavior, but they were even less comfortable with the idea of compromising what they saw as the scientific integrity of the experiment, so they voted against her removal. In the meantime, the birds and bees that brought in to work as pollinators began to die off. Kate was no longer eating, and as a result, her behavior became even more erratic. One morning, Dad found her passed out in the grassland biome next to her journal, and he actually carried her back to her sleeping quarters. He said he fought with himself as to whether or not he should read her journal. After all, there might be something in there that could help unpack what she was going through. But he felt it would be a violation of her privacy and ultimately decided not to. He says now that it's one of 100 decisions he made during that time he regrets because the next morning, Kate was gone. Not gone as in dead, but gone as in vanished. One day, she was there. The next, she wasn't. Her things were still exactly where they'd been when Dad brought her back the day before, including her journal on the nightstand, but she herself was nowhere to be found. The entire team searched every square inch of that biosphere and found absolutely nothing. It was then and only then that Dad opened his friend's journal and saw what she had been so engrossed in over the past few months. He hid it from the project's organizers when they sent in the replacement Kate and kept it secret the entire time, taking it with him when he finally left in '93. He keeps the journal in the safe in his office, but has let me see it several times. Kate was an incredible artist. She could draw lifelike portraits of almost anyone she met from memory, and you can see that the first few pages were illustrations of the various project members. Then it starts to change. she began sketching the grassland biome, the scale of it expanding over time until the savanna stretched out to the horizon as if it went on forever. Then, he said, a new element came into those sketches. The expansive grassland was the same, but there was a distortion, almost like you were squinting into the sunlight she had drawn, and behind that sunlight was something you couldn't quite see. In the margins of one of those illustrations were scribbles, illegible except for one. It reads, "He of the Sun." The project's organizers were alerted to Kate's disappearance as soon as the search was completed, and the replacement plan was decided on immediately. One of the runner-up candidates was briefed, and then, under the cover of night, the biosphere was unsealed to allow external oxygen, and the replacement Kate moved in. By the end of the 2-year project, everyone had lost enough weight that they were able to pass off the fake Kate as real, and no one except the people involved were any wiser. After exiting the biosphere, the real Kate's friends and family were told via letter that her experiences over the past 2 years had inspired her to backpack the world. She had been impulsive enough and was close to few enough people that this wasn't completely impossible, and they bought it. It's been 4 years now, long enough for people's lives to move on. The only people who know what really happened to Kate, her dad and his team, me, and now, whoever reads this. The second biosphere mission failed for reasons I don't fully understand, but I do wonder if it had something to do with what happened to Kate.
Subject: What does he want? User: Lost SQI. Posted August 14th, 1996.
My family came to the Dakotas on one of the first Northern Pacific Railway trains in 1872, and we have been here ever since. My wife Sarah and I first met in 1981 and dated for quite some time. Not like kids now who will get married at the drop of a hat. No, we took our time getting to know one another with caramel rolls at Sim's or dinner at the City Cafe. We finally got hitched in the summer of 1983, and our parents helped us buy a farmhouse on a small piece of acreage outside Dickinson. Our son Donnie came along a year later, and his brother Arthur a year after that. I was the in-house maintenance man for the Ray Hotel, so mostly I worked days, but every now and then I'd be called in after hours. Sarah stayed home and looked after the boys, so the house felt more like her space than mine, and thinking about it, I guess it makes sense she would have noticed something before I did. It all started after we got our dog Hutch. Hutch is a big, dumb, sweet black lab we found wandering the side of the road down by Havelock. I wasn't high on the idea of having a dog around the house, but the boys took to him right away, so Sarah brought me around on it. Not long after he moved in with us, he took to growling and barking when there was nobody around. He never showed any aggression to Sarah or the boys. If he had, it'd have been gone in a second, just to the air, I guess. This was a daytime thing, mostly in the kitchen, so I never really saw it, but at nights he could fight something fierce when we tried to take him to do his business. Not every night, just some, and I never could figure it out. Sarah says the next thing that happened was also in the kitchen. Arthur was out playing in the yard with Hutch, and Donnie was with her helping her bake muffins. Donnie's always been more inclined to spend time inside, so if he's going to do that, I guess it's better if he's learning something at the same time. Sarah says she sent Donnie into the larder to get her something for the recipe, and she thought he'd come back, but He wasn't there. I guess she thought it was him because it looked like his shadow had crept up to her side, except when she looked to him for the ingredients, the shadow darted away like a shot. A couple seconds later, the boy actually did come back. I remember one time in the winter when the boiler at the Ray went out in the middle of the night. It was bitterly cold that night. Even with shelter belts on either side of the property, you could hear the wind howling through the windows. Still, duty calls, so when the front desk rang me up to let me know there was no heat, I threw my coveralls over yesterday's clothes and unplugged the station wagon's block heater. When I got home 2 hours later, Sarah's eyes were like saucers. She said, "Did you see him? What does he want?" I hadn't the faintest clue what she was talking about, but she was clearly upset, so I told her to calm down and asked what was going on. "The man outside on the veranda," she said. "Didn't you see him?" There hadn't been anyone out there when I'd come in, and considering the howling wind, it's probably a good thing. This wasn't outside weather. I said there hadn't been anyone there and that it was too cold for anyone to be hanging around people's front porches. There weren't any tracks in the snow or tire tread or anything that even suggested anyone had been by since I'd gone to work. Sarah was worked up something fierce, so she made me go to the peephole with her to confirm what I was saying. Sure enough, there was no one out there. She sagged against me, completely worn out, so I helped her over to the sofa and asked her again what had happened. She said that after I left, she couldn't get back to sleep, so she went downstairs to have a glass of milk. Instead of going back to bed, she'd stretched out in my recliner and tried to read a book, but fallen asleep after a couple pages. She doesn't know exactly when it was she woke up again, but she was certain, dead certain, she says, that I had walked past her and gone upstairs. Thinking I'd come home and not wanted to wake her up, Sarah left her blanket on my recliner and started to follow me up to our room when she stopped dead. My boots were not on the rubber mat by the door. Now, I have done some damn fool things around our house over the years and been bawled out good by Sarah for each and every one, but even at my thickest, I'd never track snow and mud all over her nice clean floors. And even if I had lost my mind and worn my winter boots inside, there would have been mess everywhere, but the floor was clean. Sarah checked the door, which was locked, and decided it must have been a dream. She settled back onto her chair and nodded off. She startled awake on the chair a second time, completely sure I'd come home and walked past her, but again, my boots weren't there and the door was locked. That was well and good, but this time when she was checking on the door, she looked out the peephole where she says she saw a tall man in an old, weather-beaten yellow parka laying on our veranda. He had a head of long, curly gray hair, and she couldn't see his face, but even so, she felt like he was probably in his 50s or 60s. Of course, she was worried that something was wrong with this man, but she was also understandably hesitant to open the door to a strange man in the middle of the night. Dickinson is a small town, but bad things still happen here. It was only just recently they solved that awful murder from 1981, so it's been on all our minds. Sarah called out to the man a second time and saw that this had gotten his attention as he groaned, then started struggling to his feet. She said that underneath the parka, he had a white and black checkered plaid shirt and brown work pants on. The strange circumstances already had her on edge, and the man standing made it worse. Now, all of this sounds unlikely to me, but I love and trust my wife, so I'm telling it to you as she told it to me. Sarah says that when the man turned toward the sound of her voice, His face was all caved in, like he'd been in some kind of accident. She screamed, and the ruined face almost looked like it was trying to smile. Sarah stepped back from the door and was about to tell the man that her husband was coming home soon when she heard the station wagon pull up. A moment later, I was inside the house and completely oblivious as to what was going on with my poor wife. Even though it seemed borderline impossible for her to have seen what she said she did, I took her at her word and sent her upstairs to look in on the boys. While she did, I went and fetched my hunting rifle from the cabinet and carefully did a circuit of the veranda and yard. The wind was incredible, howling and moaning like it was in pain, but I still walked the entire way around the house, looking for a sign, and came up empty. By the end, my hands were so cold that it hurt to warm them back up. My wife is a solid, God-fearing woman, and I do not question what she says she saw that night. Does that mean our house is haunted? I don't know. I really, really don't.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.